Hey, it's Chuck. So the school employs a guy, coaches the football program, does a really nice job, gets a job offer to move up in the coaching rankings. Okay, good for you. You pat him on the back. Sucks that coach is leaving. Coach takes 12 dudes with him off your football team. I like the fact that those guys get the opportunity to move up with their coach. I mean, I like that for them. But man, bro, like, come on. You took our 12 best guys with you? It wasn't enough that you left? I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm not. I mean, let's get it.
And I don't think he's going to throw the ball as much as he thinks he's going to throw the ball now that Chip Kelly's on board. And I'm happy about that. More quarterback.
The truth is, Ryan Day has made a change philosophically, but it's none of those.
You all know who wins. LSU is the drunkest fan base in the country.
And welcome into a beautiful Northeast Ohio day at Juck on Buck Studio, Akron. I wasn't going to do a show today, but Coach Day went on the podcast, and he had some things to say that were kind of tying into some notes I was kind of putting together because the transfer portal rankings just got updated. And I kind of did a deep dive on the numbers because I found some things that were just unbelievable to me when we talk about just kind of from a 30,000 foot view, how much this transfer portal has changed even from last year to this year with the way teams are approaching it. And we're going to go over some of that. But that kind of came up in the conversation. But first, I just caught Rivals pumped out their first, I think it's 18 5-stars of this class at Rivals. And it's pretty wild. We may be switching to Rivals just for this cycle because it's a little beneficial to us. They have added Carter Lowe as a 5-star at number 14 and Jordan Davison at number 18. So two guys who are not 5-stars at the other services, and it might pump up our numbers a little bit. They also have targets, Douglas Utu, who is a lineman out of Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas, and Winston Watkins, who is a wide receiver that Heartline is after. And that is maybe one of the biggest discrepancies I've seen this cycle. He is on threes, maybe 45th wide receiver, 247, 35th wide receiver. ESPN even has him as like the 17th wide receiver. He's a 5-star with Rivals. Rivals is a joke, but hey, we'll take it this cycle if it's going to give us 2 more juicy 5-stars, which I love. So Ryan Day went on the podcast. That is with Austin Ward, Jeremy Birmingham, and today with Bobby Carpenter. And it was on their live show that they do at Roosters, and I'll link the episode here in the description of the video in case you want to take a look. And, one thing that I notice immediately is how much he seems to be at ease, confident, and just a down-to-earth guy, which is interesting from a college coach. We're just not used to seeing it. They're generally not so easygoing. And a lot of his personality, being just kind of a nice guy in general, is what kind of makes people call him soft, I think. Just that he's not your typical college football coach. He doesn't have that same kind of personality to me. What I found interesting is the interview I just did with Isaiah West. Isaiah West, a running back recruit for the Buckeyes, who is, really high on the priority list, committed to Kentucky, and then he decommitted. And I just did an interview with him over the weekend. And Isaiah talked about Ryan Day, and here's what he said. Stayed over the weekend. Tell us about that visit.
Highly regarded. Absolutely.
So you guys you and the family came up and visited pretty quickly. Stayed over the weekend. Tell us about that visit.
It was a great visit. First person I talked to, we come to the building, I talked to Coach Day. Great dude. I feel like he honestly gets a bad rip. I thought he was a really cool guy. He was one of the first coaches that I talked to that spoke directly to me and not like to my parents. Of course, we toured the facilities. It's amazing. They have everything that you can think of. Got to sit down with Coach Locke. A little bit of everything. It was a great visit.
I think so. You say Coach Day, you think he gets a bad rep. I mean, this is something it's kind of a theme I've had for a little while here. But I totally agree with you. But it's interesting that you say that's like, what is the rap you feel Coach Day gets? Like what do you hear?
I feel like I hear that people say he's not the most pleasant guy. I feel like I've heard that he's not like the best guy to talk to, but I didn't get that at all.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, man. Now, I don't know that I've ever heard that from anybody. That surprises me a lot. It really surprises me. Now, I had heard once from a server in Columbus, someone who I trust, that Ryan Day, had a reputation in the restaurant that he dined at as being kind of a jerk. I was like, that's no way. I'm not buying that at all. I've never met Ryan Day. Then Isaiah West said that. Is that his reputation? How does a guy that seems so nice get a reputation like that? I don't know. It struck me as really odd because everything I've ever seen of him just seems like a very happy, jovial guy, a guy who would be a really a nice guy to talk to, just a nice dude. So that really surprised me when Isaiah said that is what he had heard about him. Now, of note, Isaiah does go to St. Joe's Prep. It is the school that Kyle McCord went to. Is there a tie-in somewhere there? I suppose it's possible. I don't know, man, but it's something that really took me by surprise. But Ryan Day was as nice as ever on that interview with those guys, who seems to be that's his favorite crew to talk to. There's no doubt about that in the Buckeye media world. He really has linked up kind of with Austin Ward as kind of the one guy that is running the official message out from the program, and that's fine. That's his role. As long as everybody knows, that's cool. But they discussed, for one, the quarterbacks, and one thing that I thought was interesting when Ryan said they all kind of got the same skill set except for Julian. Now, nothing about Julian, other than he's just better at passing the ball, jumps off as a different part of his skill set to me. So I would love to hear him elaborate on that a little bit more. But the thing that came up that obviously has been driving me crazy forever is the narrative of purchasing a roster. They even hit on Lane Kiffin, and Lane Kiffin doing this with his $13 million accusation that started that entire thing, and that $13 million number we hear nonstop now, all because of Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin, the guy with the number one portal class, which probably cost them in excess of $20 million. Ryan Day, of course, said all those guys wanted to come to Ohio State. The guys at Alabama and Caleb Downs and Julian Sayin, they never would have came aboard if Saban hadn't retired. Of course, we've talked about this 100 times. He said that Julian Sayin, when he became available, that was a process. As if to say, he wasn't really just right in the portal. There had been some communication before he got in the portal, which I didn't know. I think that's the first time we've ever heard that. And Caleb Downs was down to Ohio State and Alabama in his recruitment at the end, and he chose Alabama. Ryan Day said that was a tough phone call, but a safety that wants to play for Nick Saban, he understood. So he said he gets in the portal, wants to come to Ohio State. Well, it was a little bit tougher than that, and of course they all flew down to go see the Downs family immediately, which was just, it was a great move, and it solidified the best secondary in the country. But when they brought it up a second time, he just said, if that's the game, we're going to play it. And I absolutely love his attitude here. Because we look at year 1 and year 2 in the transfer portal, that was not the Ohio State attitude. That was not where they were at all. Philosophically, it was a very passive, we're going to wait and see what's going on. And everybody was saying they don't have the money. And I think it was more they were handcuffing themselves. They weren't going out and trying to get the money. They weren't diverting any athletic donation, letting the donors know to the athletic department, it's okay to go ahead and divert some of this over here. So the strategy was very much a very passive one. And this year, it's no longer been a passive one. It's not been aggressive in the fact that they didn't go out and try to get a bunch of guys. You know, we know that these guys kind of came to us. They went out. The ones they did get were positions of need. They got the safety. They got the quarterback they needed. They got a center. They needed him. And they got a tight end. They needed him. They went after the positions of need. The other guys were just a great bonus, a fantastic bonus. But they had the money to get it done when those guys became available. So financially aggressive, yes. Most people couldn't get that deal done around the country. The Buckeyes did. But if this is the game, we're going to play it. I absolutely love the aggression because that's what it's got to be. If you want to win national championships, you have to get the best of the best guys that are available on that portal market. He talked about his decision to bring in Julian Sayin. And when that all happened, I came on here and said that was a decision that I don't think Ryan Day would have made in the past. It was one of the, through our timeline here of the things that Ryan Day's kind of changed, that was one of the first ones, and it was a big one. And like he said here, if that's the game, we're going to play it. Again, that's new. And the decision to bring in Julian Sayin, I don't think it's something he would have done in the past. Some people disagree with me on this, and I understand. It's a very ruthless way of doing things that in the end he justified it by saying, I have to do what's best for the team. And I just don't think he would have done it in the past. And he admitted it was an incredibly difficult decision for him to make. There's a lot of pride in that locker room. He said, you got to look people in the eye. And I'm just going to say, I'm flippantly going to take Julian Sayin after I've been recruiting Aaron Nolan for all this time. Now, he's talked about this in a past interview, and in the past one, he did say, you talk to a kid, talking about Air, tell him you're not going to take two quarterbacks. So, that's the conversation that was had. You recruit a guy, a top guy like Aaron Nolan, you're not taking a second quarterback in that class, which he didn't. Same was a transfer. And a transfer that landed in his lap, and he had a decision to make. And the decision to take him is a decision I don't think he would have made in the past. And I think that was kind of the starting point of us seeing him kind of get a little more, I don't want to say SEC stylish, but just a little more cutthroat. And it's not a fuzzy, cuddly feeling to run a program that way. But he understands that he has a goal to win national championships. And if he wants to win those national championships, these are the decisions he's got to make. And that's the way he feels right now. And, I don't like it either. But I'm all for it. And what we've heard from the people that are close to the program, Aaron Nolan did not have a good spring. He just didn't. He looked pretty good in the spring game, but, he did not look good in the spring. He's had issues. We've heard personal issues. Who knows what that is? I'm not speculating on that, but we've heard that from people on, the beat and around the program. Things have just not been great for him in his adjustment to Ohio State. Whatever. Plenty of time to get over that. But the point is I'm making here is he was no lock to come in and just be that guy. And nobody is when they're coming as a freshman. But to have that Julian Sayin in the mix now and Tavian behind him, the quarterback room is in a really good situation. But when I talk about in the intro, Ryan Day has changed philosophically, but it's none of those. I'm talking about this right here. He changed philosophically in that he was getting a little more cutthroat. He did not change philosophically in that he was going out getting a bunch of transfer portal guys. And he reiterated that seven times. We're not a program that goes out and takes a bunch of transfers. And they're not. And I like that. I like that he believes in the chemistry of his locker room, but I don't think you can afford to pass on big-time talent upgrades when you got the money to do it. And if that's the game, we're playing it. All right, so new updated transfer portal rankings came out of 24/7. And the Buckeyes are still in the top 10 of the transfer portal rankings. And there's quite a few different kind of teams in that top 10. And we'll go over that top 10. But I want to kind of I dug in on some numbers here, and I want to share them with you. So for starters, we've seen the both windows come and go. You can still sign transfer portal players, but all the big name guys, the impact kind of guys, they're pretty much off the market now. So the rosters we see are pretty much solidified in any way that's going to move the needle here. But the portal's not something that I like. I don't think it's particularly good for the guys that are doing it. I think there's a ton of guys that make poor decisions, end up stuck in the portal in a worse situation than what they left. We just don't hear about that as much. Way more, we hear that happens way more than the guys who get some massive payday and end up like a good story, like a Bo Nix or Michael Penix. The guys who go in the portal and just don't make it out of the portal. Way more of that than the good stories. So it's not a great thing from that perspective. And I can't wait till we eventually get to transfer once, no issue. Second time, you got to sit out a year. And that is what they want. And I think we will eventually get to that. But we're still going to see the portal. We're just going to see much less than we're seeing now. Because there are a whole lot of teams out there, now that both windows are through, who have essentially an entire recruiting class worth of portal guys. We figure a recruiting class, let's just say 20 guys. That would be a small one. Buckeyes have had some 21s and 22s recently. 20 would be a relatively small recruiting class. But I went through and I counted how many classes. I mean, 20 guys. Think about that. With on top of your recruiting class, you're bringing in 42-ish guys, right? 42 guys on an 85-man roster in one cycle. You're turning over half of the entire roster. But how many teams are bringing in 20 guys? That's a whole lot, right? Can't be too many. 41. 41 teams brought in 20 guys, which means on top of their recruiting class, 41 teams flipped 50% of their roster. That blew my mind. When this first started going on, like last year, we were talking, there was a couple teams that hit 20, and when they did, that was just astronomical to hear that. Now there are 41 teams in that stratosphere, which is just mind-blowing to me. This is so different than anything we have ever experienced in this sport. We talk a lot about the individual guys, the big money guys that go in the transfer portal, and all the stories about the portal, or the schools that sign this guy or that guy. But I don't think we're really spanning out and taking a look at how much this has changed the entire sport when 41 teams are bringing in 20 new dudes in a year on top of their portal class or on top of their recruiting class. That's wild, man. And the portal being relatively new and evolving, I think it's very interesting to take a look at the different kind of strategies that we got going on with the portal. We don't know what's best. And I think it kind of depends on what state your program's in as to what the best approach is. But there's a lot of different ones. There's plenty of teams approaching it very cautiously, like the Buckeyes, who were a little more aggressive, as I said, financially in the third year. But they weren't more aggressive. High-quality players, upgrade where you can. And if you see someone out there who is worth taking a swing at, go get him. Keenan Nelson at safety, Will Howard where they needed a quarterback, Seth McLaughlin at center, Will Kazmarek at tight end. That would have been the portal class had Saban not retired and Quinshawn not reached out to the Bucs. So I counted every team's number of portal guys before we added Keenan Nelson, and there were 92 teams who had taken more transfer portal guys than the Buckeyes. 92. I didn't do all that today, but I did go down to 50 in the rankings. And in the top 50 portal classes, the Buckeyes had the fewest number in the top 50. So still absolute bare minimum of transfers when the Buckeyes are compared to the rest of college football. Other big programs that have taken the Buckeyes approach: Georgia, LSU, Notre Dame, not as few as Ohio State, but a similar approach. Those are also very talented rosters, like Clemson. And Clemson, Dabo talked about, not many people can come in and play for us. And he's right. And the same thing goes at Georgia and LSU and Notre Dame. But they pick their spots. Dabo doesn't want to pick his spots. That's fine. Generally, these guys are going to be looking for some depth, upgrading a few positions where you can, but you can't upgrade too many at an Ohio State or a Georgia because you've already recruited and developed the guys that are would be the premium guys if they entered the portal. So there's not too many guys who can come in and upgrade yet. Now, on the opposite end of that, you've got the crazy outliers like Colorado, who currently has 42, in Louisville, who's now brought in 30 transfers. Then you got teams with new coaches, and with new coaches, you're going to expect this. They're generally at about 25 transfers. Former Duke coach Mike Elko, who took over Texas A&M, the school that has a ton of money, ton of fan support. Most people think is a sleeping giant. For some reason, has never been able to do it at all. 28 portal players at Texas A&M, and they've made the top 10, which is understandable when you're a new coach. Jed Fish up at Washington, who took over for Kalen DeBoer, they've got about 29 in their portal class. I think the most interesting team are the aggressive teams who are kind of that next rung down, like UCF, Houston, and Cincinnati. These are teams that are very aggressive in the portal, scooping up guys that weren't quite good enough to play at the Ohio States, Georgias, and LSUs. And they are making hay and really improving their roster this way. I think it's a pretty good strategy. And we're talking about schools that are very, very aggressive, schools that worked their way from smaller conferences into bigger conferences in the Power Four because they have a lot of support, money, fan base. Like, they want it really bad. Got to respect schools like that. And they're really upgrading their roster through the portal. Well, I don't like the idea of bringing in a ton of new guys when we talk about team chemistry. It's not the greatest, but I don't know how you can pass it up when you're a guy like UCF and, you know, you're seeing dudes that can improve your roster and you got the money to do it. It's going to be interesting to see how it turns out in the next couple of years for schools that have done this, because we're just now seeing these really big classes of 25 become normal. Then you got the guys who are just kind of middle of the road, who are doing it normal, like an Auburn or a Utah with 13-ish commits, doing the same approach that the Georgias and the Ohio States are doing. They just have a couple more holes to fill. And finally, we got the whatever class, the ones who really don't care about football, who bring in a ton of money from their conference. Many of them have tons of fan support, and they just don't care to try. As for the top 10, Ole Miss, number 1. Oregon, number 2, no surprise there. Alabama, 3, with a new coach, you'd expect that. Texas A&M, 4, with a new coach, you'd expect that. Florida, 5. Texas, 6. Florida State, 7. Colorado, 8, just based on sheer number at 42. It's the only way they could see that kind of ranking. Ohio State, 9, and Miami, 10. 5 SEC, 2 ACC, 2 Big Ten in Ohio State and Oregon, and Colorado. The fact that there are no more Big Ten teams in here is just, it's kind of disheartening. So many of them could stand to improve from the portal. And I've hit on this before, but I hate that we play in a conference with so many schools who just don't seem to try hard. They just don't. I don't see the investment. I don't see the desire. These are teams that got $60 million from the Big Ten last year. Every Big Ten team. Well, Rutgers and Maryland got $58 million. They're still not at their full share. They simply don't try to make their teams better like we see everybody else do. We see the whole SEC do it. Everyone from top down, except for Vanderbilt. It's really obnoxious. So how is the rest of the conference doing? Just outside the top 10, we got Washington at 11 with 29 transfers. Sparty is at 12 with 24 transfers. And in the lower end of the top 25, we got USC at 19 and Wisconsin at 23, which means 3 out of the 4 new members in the Big Ten are in the top 25, and only 3 of the 14 old guard Big Ten members are in the top 25. And part of me wanted to see these new guys come in from the Pac-12 and the old guys kind of stick it to them. Like, this is how we do it here. You know what? I think I'm going to be rooting for the Pac-12 guys now because they're coming in and actually trying to play good football, and we see everybody else like Iowa sitting on their hands. When you're a Big Ten school getting that piece of a pie, $60 million, and you're getting out-hustled, outworked, and embarrassed by Cincinnati, UCF, Houston, and Memphis, something's wrong, man. Something's seriously wrong. So who's improved in the Big Ten? Coach Fick up at Wisconsin, 23rd ranked class. It's a really nice class. 16 big men, some good linebackers, including Tackett Curtis from USC, who we were in on out of high school. Brought in Tyler Van Dyke from Miami. Pretty good quarterback. Couple good-looking wide receivers, so good for Fick. They brought him in to do just this. Purdue, with the 30-ranked class, second-year coach, Ryan Walters. This is a hot young coach. 18 total transfers, but get this. 2 wide receivers from Georgia, an edge rusher from Georgia, and a cornerback from Georgia. Listen, I don't care if these are great Georgia players or not. I mean, they transferred. If you're good enough to get a scholarship and get on the roster at Georgia, you are a big improvement to whatever they got at Purdue. So good for him. They got some big men there. I think Purdue might get cooking here pretty soon. This dude's really on it. He might be their James Franklin at Vanderbilt. Who knows? Kind of looks like him, actually, a young James Franklin. Indiana. So Kurt Cignetti comes up from James Madison to Indiana, talks all his smack. 27th ranked class, 31 new guys, 12 guys from James Madison, and I'm interested in what you guys think of that. So the school employs a guy, coaches the football program, does a really nice job, gets a job offer to move up in the coaching rankings. Okay, good for you. You pat him on the back. Sucks that coach is leaving. Coach takes 12 dudes with him off your football team. I like the fact that those guys get the opportunity to move up with their coach. I mean, I like that for them. But man, bro, like, come on. You took our 12 best guys with you? It wasn't enough that you left? I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm not. I mean, Kalen DeBoer, he took some of the best guys and recruits over with him to Alabama. I think it was only like 4. Might be a pretty crummy thing to do. Minnesota, PJ Fleck with the 35th ranked class. He got 13 guys and some really good-looking prospects. But Kirk Ferentz, who's kind of trying to make one more push towards the end of his career here, and has a really good-looking team, a great defensive coordinator, always a good defense. They've been even better than they've ever been recently. I mean, they're just fantastic. Offense has been awful. The way he was so defensive, like oddly defensive about that offense with his son. What he did with Doug Maurice, you know, you come at my guy Doug, I got an issue with you. But Kirk Ferentz is a guy that I've always had a ton of respect for. He was a Browns coach. I've loved what he's done at Iowa. But you get these guys towards the end of their career that are just stubborn, and as a fan base, you're probably just waiting for them to retire. We're lucky that we've not been through it. Now, our coaches have not left in the greatest of ways, but we've never had to deal with a Bowden or a Joe Pa situation where we're just waiting for this guy to retire because things have clearly gone downhill, but you can't push him out because he's your legend. And that's what they're going to be dealing with Ferentz here pretty soon, if they're not feeling that way already. 3 guys in the portal is what he brought in, 2 of them from Northwestern. This is a program with a ton of money, a ton of fan support. It's just pathetic. How many positions at Iowa do you think could they have upgraded in the portal? Because when we look at the portal, you can get guys in the portal who are now serious about their business, about what they want. Guys that you could not get out of high school to come to Iowa. You can get them now. Like we saw Terrence Brooks, a starting cornerback at Texas, go to Illinois. You can now do this. Like, this has now opened the door for the Iowas and Northwesterns and Illinois to be able to get prospects that they could not get out of high school. And Ferentz doesn't want anything to do with it. He'd rather sit on his hands and just, I'm blown away by this. I'm blown away by the athletic directors who let these guys get away with this. Like, just, no, I'm not doing it. It's just crazy to me. But Illinois has been doing really good. Illinois obviously invested, got a brand new facility. They were 49th in the rankings, which is good for Illinois. Signed Terrence Brooks. Brett Bielema is getting after it, man. Getting after it. Northwestern, excellent new facility. They're building a new stadium. The facility's right on Lake Michigan. It's beautiful. You're in Chicago. They seem like a team that could have, some decent opportunity to bring in some good portal players. They don't have a ton of money or fan support. Definitely not like Iowa or Wisconsin, but they brought in 5 transfers. They can definitely do better. But this is why the SEC has so many teams they're just better because they're invested from the bottom half of the conference down. In the Big Ten, after 6 or 7 teams, they just, it's like they're just going through the motions year after year after year. And we got to play in a conference with a bunch of people like this who take up games on our schedule that are boring, and we mollywop them, and then they point the finger at the big bad Ohio State. Like, do better for yourself. You suck. It's so obnoxious. I can't stand it. So Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss sitting at number 1 on the leaderboard. 22 commits, the same guy who is responsible for making us listen to the $13 million garbage. I think the most interesting thing in that top 10 is Florida State. Having just gone undefeated in the regular season, winning the ACC championship, they go dip back in the portal for 17 guys. And this is Mike Norvell's entering into his 5th year. He's had 4 full cycles of recruiting, and he's still needing to hit the portal up for 17 guys. That doesn't make any sense to me. You shouldn't need to continue to keep doing that after 4 years at Florida State. You should have a roster that's good enough where you can't bring in 17 guys to improve your team. On 3 is hosting an elite. It's called On 3 Elite, and it's On 3 is hosting On 3 Elite. And this is a by invitation only thing for NIL that they sent out to 50 top prospects in the country. And they're hosting, I guess, a party, like a whole weekend deal with speakers, people in the financial industry, etc., to kind of walk these guys who are, they're future NFL players through how this is going to go for NIL and financial advice and all this stuff. But they're bringing them in, whining and dining them. Trey McNutt and Devin Sanchez Trey posted this picture of him and Devin Sanchez in the pool together at the pool party. We got some official weigh-ins. Devin Sanchez official measurement, 6'2", 180, wingspan of 6'5". Tavian St. Clair, 6'3 3/4", 225 pounds. I love it. Jamie Ffrench in the news from this thing here. Jamie Ffrench, of course, the wide receiver, Mandarin High School in Florida, was a Buckeye lean, came out, totally surprised everybody when he announced his top schools and the Buckeyes weren't in there. Then he announced his official visits and the Buckeyes weren't in there. On 3's Chad Simmons and Steve Wiltfong both have him crystal balled to Texas. Jamie himself just said that Texas is number 1. LSU, Miami, 2 and 3. Ohio State and Tennessee are still in it, but there's a gap between the Longhorns and everybody else heading into his officials. He had talked about making his decision in the summer. This was about 3 weeks ago, but said that he was going to take a visit to Columbus still when he was talking to Mark Givler in the fall. None of it made any sense. None of it makes any sense still. Pete Nakos wrote an article about his conversation with Jamie today. Jamie's not afraid to admit what he's looking for in a school. He said, you want to get taken care of anywhere you go. That's just a big thing in college football. So you want to make sure that's a piece of it, but you also want to make sure you're taking care of the stuff on the field. His dream NIL deal would be a Lamborghini deal, like former Texas star Bijan Robinson, who had a Lamborghini for a year from an endorsement with Lamborghini of Austin. Lamborghini has continued to work with Texas athletes, signing Jordan Whittington, Jake Majors, and Jalen Ford as partners in 2023. Nakos goes on to write, Ffrench saw how Ohio State delivered for top 24 wide receiver Jeremiah Smith on early signing day, making sure whichever program he decides can deliver in the same fashion is at the top of his mind. Dude, I'm so out on this guy. He's not Jeremiah Smith, dude. Like, what? Good luck to Texas. Like, that's how I feel about this. Are you serious? Now, that's not a quote from Jeremiah, or that's not a quote from Jamie Ffrench. That Pete Nakos wrote that. Ffrench saw how Ohio State delivered for top 24 wide receiver Jeremiah Smith on early signing day, making sure whichever program he decides on can deliver in the same fashion is at the top of his mind. Now, I'm reading that to mean deliver a fat contract on signing day. Like, that's the way that's reading to me. And yeah, I just don't think there's any way that the Buckeyes are getting into a fat contract deal with Jamie Ffrench when the separation from Jamie Ffrench and the next several guys is going to be much less separation than what he appears to be wanting delivered on versus what those guys want delivered on. Jamie Ffrench's top priority is who can get him into the NFL development, blah, blah, blah. Which, you know, we hear it more and more, and I just almost wish we could go back to the days where these guys would fake it and pretend like they wanted to play college football, and it all wasn't about the NFL. But really, Jamie Ffrench has a great personality, a very likable guy, and I very much like him. But everything he's done in the last month has just totally turned me off. Like, I give me somebody else. Give me somebody else. Obviously, if he signed with the Buckeyes, I would root for him tremendously. But at this point, like, I'm Dorian Brew heading into his officials, according to Steve Wiltfong, Ohio State and USC are emerging as the favorites. So now Wiltfong has put Ohio State back in there after last week. It was USC, Texas, and LSU. No Ohio State. This week, Ohio State, USC emerging as the favorite. You know what I mean? Like, come on, dude. I'm done listening to this guy. You can't do this. He's trying to yo-yo us. I know he is. We called it. We already called it. Vernell Brown, wide receiver the Buckeyes really want out of Florida. Just moved from 160 up to number 38 in the country last week. Chad Simmons, recruiting director around 3, says Florida State and Florida have the buzz around his end. And finally, Trey McNutt, taking an official visit to USC this weekend and Florida next weekend. Ohio State, Oregon, Texas A&M, and Georgia. He stands high on all of them. He will release his official visits later. And his mom wants him to take a visit out to Colorado at some point. He said he's enjoying the process and wants to make the right decision and will likely take his recruitment into the football season. Maron. Colorado. 42 transfers. Deion's Louis all just left, and he said he was happy about it. An absolute train wreck of a program, an embarrassment to college football, and I'm just, yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know what to say about that. All right, guys, that'll do me for it. Just wanted to give you a quick hitter today, and we will talk about some more stuff maybe tomorrow. Who knows? If I'm going on, maybe I'll do a little shorter shows this week and get a couple more in. But I felt like a blabbermouth today, and I just had to come on and talk. So I will talk to you tomorrow or the next day. Who knows? Juck on Bucks out.